Hi, my name's Bill Gourlay and I'm Group Chief Commercial Officer at Kahn Group. And I'm delighted to welcome you to this, the conclusion of the Perspectives 2020 series. We launched Perspectives to take into account the ever-changing landscape that coronavirus and COVID have brought upon all of us, the impact that it had on the workplace and that it had on our lives in general. And as a matter of course, it also brought to the fore a degree of thoughtfulness across all of the industry and probably all of the broader community as well, in terms of key topics such as health, sustainability, diversity, and clearly the implications on the broader economy that coronavirus brought. We had clearly heard from individuals whose workplaces were being impacted by it, and were having to evolve the way that they did business, or in the case of other places, were really finding that their businesses were struggling and potentially on their knees as a result of the economic impact of coronavirus. And last but not least, we were clearly were lucky enough to have a couple of brave individuals who are actually working on the front line with coronavirus, treating and caring for patients who had sadly caught it, and in some cases who actually passed away as a result of it. And so we certainly appreciate the insights that those individuals were kind enough to share with us, that really brings us the full picture of the impact that this terrible disease has had on the world. Thank you for joining us, and I hope you enjoy the highlights that we're about to play for you.
We hear the term "everything has changed" quite a bit. In fact, I've heard it in 1987, I heard it in 2001 after 9/11, I heard it, of course, after the big Great Recession in 2008, 2009. But this is a time where I believe everything really has changed. There are a few things that happen within every generation that shape that generation. This is one of those things that we will be talking about in 30, 50 years as something that shaped our entire generation. And I'm not only talking about the millennials or the Generation Xers, I'm also talking about middle-aged, Armenian Americans, which have experienced unique emotions, things that we never thought we would experience with this entire pandemic. Change is inevitable. All right, and embracing change in whatever form it takes place is absolutely crucial to survival. And I guess it's being more the product of a generation of survivors that has led me to believe that. But if you don't end up evolving, then you end up dying. And that is really the question mark that's going to be left here after this entire pandemic. Will people evolve? Will they embrace change?
The realization that the urban lifestyle wasn't good for me, both mentally and physically, and for my professional development, that essentially set me on the track to return to Africa. And it really, again, it was one of the best decisions of my life, as evidenced by the fact that the company I now run is still there, and my entire focus is now on my work in wildlife conservation and sustainable management in East Africa. Build back better is the phrase that lots of people are saying. Many of the scientists, commentators that I read, economists, are making a good case for using this opportunity to invest in economic activities, business activities, structures in societies across the world, across sectors, that mean that when we emerge from the crisis, the economy is stronger, more resilient, and more ready to deal with future shocks, whether it's another health crisis, a pandemic or an epidemic, or whether it's the crises that we know are going to be hitting us as societies as climate change rolls out.
I remember loving to write stories when I was young, and so I thought I would grow up to be an author. But subconsciously, I must have made up my mind that in order to be able to defend myself from all that teasing, I must become a lawyer. Even my parents were surprised. Yes, I was going to be the first lawyer in the family's history. Now, I'm not saying every career woman must aim for that big job to be labeled as successful. In fact, quite the contrary. Success should be defined by you alone and not by others. If you decide to be a stay-at-home mom, there's nothing wrong with that. Or if you want to be that hard-nosed career woman sitting on boards, there is also nothing wrong with that. But the main thing is that in whatever you do, it's about making a positive impact in other people's lives. So live your life with a sense of purpose.
Most recently, I was British ambassador in the Gulf, in the United Arab Emirates, and then in Afghanistan. And I first started going to Afghanistan in the late 1990s when the Taliban had just taken Kabul. That was an incredibly grim time to get to know a country and its people. There had been a bitter civil war going on for many years, and I was working in support of a UN peace process that ultimately did not succeed. I was the single Western diplomat based in Afghanistan. Incredible now when you think about the United Kingdom has one of its largest embassies in Afghanistan. The United States has its largest embassy there. But in those days, there was just me from the OECD, from the Western European and North American countries based in Afghanistan. So yes, COVID-19 is a period of change, and it needs to be a period of permanent change. And most of all, given the roots of COVID-19 in pandemic, in zoonotic disease and the illegal wildlife trade, there needs to be a change in our relationship with nature and our relationship, indeed, with wildlife itself. And that's why, as I look at the role of the Zoological Society of London and of how we engage with people, I see this as an opportunity to rethink the impact that we have, to rethink the impact we have through the education we do, and raising the flag of concern about that relationship between wildlife and people, and how in an unmanaged way that poses enormous risks to us. And COVID-19 has had a devastating impact, as I said earlier, on so many people, but there are even worse pathogens that can be carried by bats. There are even worse zoonotic diseases that are awaiting around the corner if we don't get a grip on this relationship between wildlife and people.
In my athletics career, you get judged by the numbers. You are either a 146, 147, 148, 800 meter runner, or you're not. And I think as a CEO, we get judged by the numbers as well. You can have a different philosophy, and it can sound more colorful, and it can sound way more enticing and way more interesting, but you ultimately are judged by the numbers. We have been thinking globally but acting locally for quite some time. But when you couple that with hyperconsumption and the need for resources without sustainability developed into the thinking of us as individuals or the businesses who are serving that demand, we really are on a path that has serious issues associated with it.
Of course, one of the many reasons people work in healthcare is because they want to look after people. And I care about caring, about being kind, about trying to understand and ease other people's suffering. While much of the work has been upsetting, and the mortality rates in intensive care is good evidence of that, it has also been rewarding. I feel hugely privileged to have watched patients talk to their families, via FaceTime of course, after weeks on a ventilator, see them take joy in eating for the first time in over a month, and clap them as they are discharged from the intensive care unit. But as hard as it has been, I also feel privileged to have been able to care for the dying, to pass on messages of love from their loved ones who aren't allowed to be by their side, to hold their hands in their last moments, and to be there to say goodbye. It has been physically tiring. Wearing PPE over 13 hours shifts would be exhausting even if you were just sitting doing nothing. But it has also been emotionally draining. And I think there will be many healthcare workers, and perhaps I will be one of them, who won't appreciate the full toll until it's over.
One of my favourite things also to consider is walk a mile in my shoes. You never ever know what anybody is going through. You never know what they have come through already. You never know just that they've had a really bad morning or whatever it is. You just don't know. And therefore, walk a mile in my shoes really just says you need to consider what other people might be going through. I'm passionate about healthcare myself, unsurprisingly. And I think that this creates the opportunity like never before to transform how we deliver health care to our population. I think, we don't have to worry about, we shouldn't be worrying about incremental changes. We should be thinking about what can we do that's revolutionary. What can we do to, we in this country have been inclined to beat up on our health services. I think this is an opportunity for us to recreate and reimagine and reinvent our health services in a way that means that we will be proud of them as a country.
I really believe from a capitalist perspective that we need to really embrace diversity in order to maximize returns and profitability for everyone across the spectrum, again, from Main Street to Wall Street. In terms of professional and personal goals, one of the goals that I have is I would really like to see more diversity in the industry. When I first got into the industry in 1998, it took me 10 years to meet another woman who had a job that was similar in description to mine. 10 years. And, I know it's corny, but they do say if you can't see it, you can't be it. And so for the generation of girls and women who are getting into the industry or considering a career in investing in financial services at this point, I want to make sure that doesn't happen for you. I feel like ESG is all this warm and fuzzy things, like we give to charity and we have volunteer days for our employees. And that's all great. I am not saying that's not a good thing. But again, the capitalist part of me knows that really mitigating and capitalizing on your ESG risks and opportunities means that those things need to be financially material to your company. Those are the things that create resilient companies, resilient economies, and resilient individuals.
My aim, I suppose, or purpose with the business is that we don't need to exist in 5 years' time because we've done such a good job in making sure that companies inclusively hire and recruit the best talent and trying to make it more meritocratic and making sure that everyone can be themselves in work. So that's kind of where my kind of ambitions lie. What the Black Lives Matter movement did is it also kind of validated the work that we've been doing over the last 9 years. So one of the reasons I set up Audalis, for instance, is to get companies to realize that diversity is more than gender. Because I was getting frustrated with CEOs and chairmen constantly saying to me, hey, we want to hire a female CFO, a female chief marketing officer, or a female board member. And I'd be like, that's great. Well done you. But you have an entirely white leadership team and an entirely white board. What about race?
So I always say that I'm an optimistic, a pragmatic optimist with a growth mindset. And my guiding lights are to be compassionate, curious, creative and conscientious. Always believe that companies that look after their employees, suppliers, customers and the community around them, companies that do the right thing will tend to be more successful than the ones that won't. And I implemented the UN principles for responsible investing in our investment process in 2006 when they first came out. And that included for bond managers as well, which at the time was really was unthinkable.
In particular, if you look at an area of focus, which my company does, is in orphan diseases. So these are what we call rare diseases. Despite the fact it's rare, orphan diseases, actually, some people have mentioned that cancers is just a combination of many rare diseases, rare tumors accumulated together as a landscape. So just to give you some idea, right now there are over 7,000 orphan diseases that have been identified by the various regulators around the world, and almost over 90% of these orphan diseases are currently untreated or does not have effective treatment. Really only 5% of these diseases have treatment right now, and the other 5% is still undergoing various stages of clinical development. I believe that no one party would be able to tackle all of them. It really is a concerted effort around the public and private bodies around the world together to be able to tackle this, and it will require a lot of sharing of information, breaking down the barriers, in particular political barriers between the countries, to let the science thrive and develop a solution for this pandemic as well. So, so in that sense, I really hope the world will be able to grapple this virus within the near future.
You got to be number one. Some things you can be number two, but you really have to be number one in any one thing you do. And then you've got to have incredible technology, incredible people, and you've got to deliver world-class customer service. Because if not, the customer's alternative options, and they will undoubtedly take those options, and you're left in the dust. I think about continually hiring great people. I kind of see it as hiring people better than me, because once I do that, I make the business better. Once I make the business better, they help people around them to be even better. But it also helps me because it pulls me and helps me rise along. So I'm a huge believer in hiring better. So the key thing in all of this is to innovate across services. You don't need to invent, you don't need to be the first person there. But the key things to understand is how you make it better, and to be maniacally focused on making things better every day of the week. So whether it's a product or whether it's a service, the key thing is that you never stop innovating. That you innovate about every potential aspect, because you know that people can compete against you on 100 domains, 100 different parts of a product or service. And what you have to do is to break it down, and you're out innovating on every single aspect of that. And once you're in that position, I think you're in a position to drive huge change.
I've got to tell you that by far, motherhood is the most challenging, trying job of all time. I mean, I thought banking was tough at times, working sometimes 24/7. I thought the pharmaceutical industry, crossing different time zones and traveling so often, was tough. But oh my goodness, that was nothing compared to the joys of motherhood. Point being is that when people talk about race brackets, when people talk about diversity, it's not a monolithic example. You cannot just put everybody that's black or everybody that's brown and think their experiences are all the same. I've just given you an example right now where absolutely it's not the same. There are so many cultural nuances, there's so many environmental differences, there's so many examples of how everybody should be treated differently, but equally at the same time because of their backgrounds. So these are things that have really driven the work that I do.
I moved on really from asking how aeroplanes and how big lumps of metal got far into space or up into the air. I got from asking those questions from an engineering perspective to really thinking about the perspective from an organizational systems perspective. I realized that the engineers did the clever technology bit that got things into the air. But actually, when you really think it through, it's the organizations, it's the cooperation, it's the economics, it's the engineering and the technology, of course, but it's a holistic set of activities that together allow you to get amazing things done. And it was that made me then flip to management.
But it shows that if you back yourself and you have the confidence, then the fortitude and resilience of the individual with the right training and support can effectively achieve almost anything. For me, the firm was focused on clients first. It was a firm that was genuinely global. The leadership was the one aspect of JP Morgan I would call out. And Jamie Dimon, who's probably been one of the longest lasting CEOs on Wall Street, for me was and is probably the best leader I've seen within an organization I've worked with. And I've worked with lots and lots of great leaders. The failures of the financial sector in the global financial crisis came down to a failure of culture, a failure of literally understanding what the role of banks are, the responsibilities that we had to the markets, the regulators, the public. The fact that cultures are not self-sustaining, you've got to refresh them, you've got to continue to remind people what are the principles of your business, what is your true North Star, and ultimately what the culture of the firm is.
Our values really are intrinsic to who we are, but what I believe in is work ethic. I believe in working hard. I think it's an essential ingredient in being happy, being successful in life. Also, I think developing good relationships with people is so important, both in your working life and obviously in your personal life as well. I think developing trust, being able to get on with people and having mutual respect for each other is so important. So those are just some of the basic values that I believe in and that I do my best to put into practice every day. We're very versatile as a people. I think we do adapt and we get on with life, and I think that's a great value in Irish people. It's part of our spirit, and we will come through this.
I really do see technology as a key to the way we are advancing in the financial services industry. We need to be more focused on how we implement the technology, how we leverage technology in our organizations. I really believe it will provide a higher quality, not just a higher quality of data, but more accurate data and more value in the way we now look at that data as well, to support regulations, to support the governance, to support product innovation. Many things will come out of the way we embrace the technology. But alongside that, I'm hoping to also support the development of managers, the development of teams and firms. The workforce, as we've seen because of the pandemic, it really challenged many organizations how we need to work. And what I hope when we take from that going forward is that we shouldn't go back to the same old, that our workforce really is very dynamic. We can work at home and be productive. We can balance that with social integration as well. The challenge we have is change is happening at a rapid race. And it's how we manage that and adapt to it will be key for us. We can either take it as being stressful and saying too much change, or we can look at change and the dynamics of change and the benefits it brings and say, how do we embrace that change? And I think if we look at that type of approach, it's more healthier and allows us to even embrace change quicker and adapt to it.
And so that's a wrap on Perspectives 2020. Thank you very much for joining us. We look forward to seeing you in 2021 when we'll be launching another thought-provoking series, and you'll be pleased to hear that Perspectives will return in the summer next year. So until then, on behalf of Khan, I'd like to wish you a very happy festive season and a successful 2021. Thank you very much for watching our series this year.